Hey, what is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing a deck profile for Blackwings. So I've been playing Blackwings for the past week, 2 weeks, something like that. Overall, I can say with pretty good confidence that the deck is not that great. It's fun, it has some good utility against things like Purely, Unchained, against really big combo decks like Vanadium, Junk Speeder Turbo, things like that. If you go first, you will just win the game. However, the deck's not very good, especially into rogue matchups. I haven't done super well at locals with this deck. I'm still learning it and I might keep playing it, but overall the deck is just not up to snuff. For example, so yesterday at locals, I went 1-2-1. So I beat Virtual World. I lost to Dark Worlds because I lost the die roll and they hand ripped me for 4, which was not a fun thing to have happen twice. And then I conceded the game to Volcanics because what they would essentially do is dump Scattershot. Like, I just knew this would happen. They would dump Scattershot, I would be left with just full Armor Master, and then they would just attack over it because Volcanic Emperor is 31, and Armor Master is not indestructible by battle. So, and then the final game was up against Dragon Link. We ended up tying because we had a 38-minute game 1 where his Boral End Dragon and my Chaos Angel were just sitting there staring at each other, and I could not out his, he could out mine, and then I burned him in time, so that was it. But anyway, let's go ahead and get on into the deck profile. So up first, we have 3 copies of Simoon the Poison Wind. This card is really great. This is essentially Mathmech Circular for the deck, but it is a 1.75 card combo because you need this card as well as another Blackwing. So it's not just any discard, you need a very specifically named discard. Second, we have 3 copies of Sudri, the Phantom Glimmer. This card is crazy because it is the Stratos for the archetype, but it's only for monsters that mention Blackwing Dragon. Next, we have 3 copies of Vada. This card is actually insane. This card represents up to 6 Foolish Burials. Normally you're only foolishing 2, but it is just so crazy. It's a free special, it's an extender, very good card. And then last for our 3 of Blackwing names, we have 3 Shamal the Sandstorm. This card places the Black Feather Whirlwind, which is the new one. And then this also gets you cards back from the graveyard when you summon a Dark Synchro monster. Up next, we have our 1 of Blackwing. So we have 1 Chinook. This is essentially an effect veiler that reduces the attack of the monster it targets. It's only a quick effect while you control Blackwing Synchro, so you do have to be a little bit careful. We have 1 Shuranga, the Waning Moon. This card is great because it's a pop from the graveyard, so you can use this to out things like Goes and Match, Skill Drain, Rivalry, all that kind of stuff. And then we have some extenders. We have 1 Orochi the Squall. This is really important for making Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, which is just a great interaction. You can use it to stop things like Evenly Matched. You can use it to stop things like Dark Ruler if you have a chainable spell or trap card, which we do have 1. We have 1 Hamaton. This is just a good extender. This is like the most cuttable of these 5, which is the final one is of course, the Zephyros, the Elite. This card is so crazy for the deck. Of the ones that you could cut, if you were trying to, it definitely Hamaton. I don't usually get to this card. It's just a nice card as like both a small world bridge, which we are playing, and if you just need an extra body on the field for whatever reason, this is a good card to grab. Up next, we have our 2 Black Whirlwind with our 1 of Black Feather Whirlwind. There were times where I kind of like wanted the second Black Feather Whirlwind because it got outed, but I usually never missed it, especially didn't miss the 3rd Black Whirlwind. I mean, sure, if you draw a Black Whirlwind, it is just insane going Black Whirlwind activates the moon, and then you get double Whirlwind triggers the entire time, so not having that does kind of suck, but only playing 2 and 1, totally fine to keep it down to 40. Finally, for our Blackwing cards, we have 1 Twin Shadow. This card shuffles Blackwing monsters from your graveyard and banished back into your deck, specifically Blackwing monsters. It doesn't include Blackwing Dragon, unfortunately, to summon either a Blackwing Synchro or a Blackwing Dragon. It's treated as a Synchro summon, so this allows you to get to some of your more difficult to make Blackwing Synchros a little bit easier. And then if you control 2 Blackwing monsters, you can actually activate this card from your hand. However, that usually doesn't come up, but it is important as like an extender. If you get Nib, there are some lines you can do where you grab Twin Shadow instead, and that lets you play through Nib a little bit better. Under our Consistence cards, we've got 3 Small World and 3 Prosperity. Essentially, you just really need to see Simoon. So that's what Small World is here for. And Prosperity is just really nice to dig for things like Evenly Matched or Book of Eclipse or whatever else you're siding in. I think Small World is just so powerful for this deck, especially getting into some more non-engine that we have later. So we have one Called by the Grave. It's the one of, we're playing it. And then we also have the one branded Regained. You probably see the non-engine now, but this card is really important for recycling your Blackwing names so you don't run out, as well as your extra deck cards. The extra deck isn't that tight, but I only had a couple extra deck cards that I wanted multiples of, so being able to recycle them is very important. Also, just the advantage you get off of Regained is crazy. Obviously, for Regained, we're playing 2 Bestial Lubellion, 2 Druis Worm, 1 Magnamut, and the 1 of Chaos Space. Essentially, this Chaos Space should just be the 3rd Lubellion, but I found it's also really good for on-demand recycling. The way Branded Regained is worded, you can only cycle the monsters when they get banished. So if you have to banish something preemptively, you can never get it back. So that's what Chaos Space is good for. I did have a game against, the first game against Dragon Link where I opened Magnamut Druis, and I really wished I had played something like a Ball Drake, but it's okay. And finally, we have just some hand traps that are also Small World bridges. We have Effect Veiler at 3 and 2 Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. The first game against Dragon Link where we went 38 minutes, my hand was Druis Mag, then it was like Phantasme, and then I think it was a Blackwing name and maybe Called by the Grave or something like that. No, it was Branded Regained. So I was in a really weird spot, and that's why that game went so long. In theory, I have a decent matchup against the entire deck except for Borland. So yeah, but Phantasme is really great because it opens up the whole deck. This is a Dark Dragon. So you can go things like a name into Phantasme into Lubellion, and you can also go a name into Phantasme into any other Blackwing name. The only thing you can't do is go a Bestial into a name. You can't do that with this, but that's why Effect Veiler is good, because you can, go different names into the same things. So the only other Small World bridges I would consider are something like a Radiant or maybe a Santa Claus, but you really have to explore the Small World bridges here. This is the best ones that I could come up with the cards that I have, so do with what you can. So into the extra deck, we have the 1 of Blackwing Dragon. I would really like to play 2 of this, but I just could not find a second one. Even the common copies that should be in bulk bins everywhere, I couldn't find a second copy of, but I would suggest playing 2 of this. Just because if you can't recycle it, your Vadas are dead, and being able to Foolish Burial plus, just get a free level 8 body on the field for synchro climbing is usually pretty good. We have the 2 Blackwing Assault Dragon. I don't think you need to play 3. So the way that Blackwing Assault Dragon works is when you activate a monster effect, you place a counter on this card and it's applied. It basically acts like an extra activation cost. And so if you have 1 of these on the field, they have 11 card effects. If you have 2, they have 5. And if you have 3, they have 3 card effects, monster effects before they burn themselves to death. I don't think that the 3rd one is necessary. I think it's just taking up a utility slot that you'd rather have, so that's why I'm only on 2. We're on 2 Blackwing Full Armor Master. The reason the second one is here is because in decks, against decks like Unchained that do play like an Underworld Goddess, or some decks that are main decking Kaijus, having the second Armor Master, usually they can't out it. If you Twin Shadow into an Armor Master after they've added your first one, normally they have no way to beat it. On to some other Blackwing names. We have 1 Boreal Storm, the Wicked Wind. This card is really strong. I almost sometimes wished I had a second one, but that's why Branded Regained and Chaos Space are really strong. Nothung is great because it both burns in time, but it also lets you normal summon again. So this is how you get your 3rd Black Whirlwind trigger if you need it. And then finally we have the 1 Silverwind, the Ascendant. This is good because it turns your Twin Shadow into 2 pops of anything on the field. So it's just a really good card to have as a utility slot. And that's all for the Blackwing names. There aren't a lot of good Blackwing synchros to begin with, so we're on to some more utility cards. So we have Boral Savage. We have Scarlight, Red Dragon Archfiend, and we have Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. These are all 8s. The deck is really efficient at making even-numbered synchros, but not super efficient at making odd-numbered synchros. So these are just the best ones that I had access to. You could probably cut Scarlight for the second Blackwing Dragon, just because you already have Nothung to burn in time. There's no reason to play Scarlight, but we're playing it just because it's easier to go into than some other things. On to some cards we actually do make. So we've got the one Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. This is why we play Orochi the Squall. This allows you to you can summon this with the Blackwing Dragon and Orochi, which normally if you have like a Vada or a Shamal in hand, you can grab the Orochi instead and go into this as part of your end board. We have the one of Chaos Angel. This is really strong because it does make your Armor Master indestructible by battle, just always, because you only can make it with darks. But you can make it with a light with exactly either Hot Red, you can either make it with Hot Red and Valor, which will never happen, or you can make it with like Lubellion and Vada, or Lubellion and Hamaton. So, works out. And the final synchro I have is Baron de Fleur. This should probably be Bestial Dispotter. But I didn't have it, and I wasn't about to spend 40 bucks on one, so it's Baron de Fleur. The last card is just the Raid Raptor Wystrix. You don't have to play this card. It's just really nice because sometimes you are kind of in a weird position, and summoning this to get into a different leveled monster. Like, let's say your field is like Simoon and Vada, and you don't want to make an 8. You need to get something like a Shamal on field for a 4. You can make this instead and get it on the field. Well, it can only summon 4s, but you can also use this for the King Kal Yuga lock. I was thinking about playing that. I'm only missing the Shade Brigandine, or not the Shade Brigandine, the Rusty Bardish, which it's not an expensive card. I just didn't really feel like it was necessary to play. So that's the extra deck. Again, I would cut Scarlight for the second Blackwing Dragon, and I would probably cut Baron for Bestial Dispotter. And then if you wanted to play the King Kal Yuga lock in the main, I think the only other thing I'd cut is maybe the Draco Berserker. I think I value Borderland more than Draco Berserker. On to the side deck. So siding is obviously, I always say this, siding should be for the metagame you predict, you shouldn't base it off what I'm playing, because I'm predicting my metagame. I'm predicting my locals. I'm not predicting yours. But I'm trying something a little bit different here where I'm not siding hand traps. So first up, we have 3 Solemn Strike. This is just such a strong card that I don't think anyone's respecting right now. There's a lot of times where, like, the purely players are going, effect of, like, if you go first and you set this, your purely players are going the effect of, like, one of their cards to attach, and you just strike the monster, it's destroyed, and they lose all their advantage. Along with that, the 3D barrier is kind of mandatory. It does kind of suck into some matchups because you aren't on links. This is obviously a mandatory for anything that just uses links, like Dragon Link or Code Talkers or Adignisters. Sometimes it can be a little bit unfortunate, but it's just mandatory. 3 Twin Twisters. I've been liking Twin Twisters a lot more lately than Cosmic. I don't know why, but I just like the fact that I have Twin Twisters. Along with that, for some more going second cards, we have Evenly Matched, and we have 3 Book of Eclipse. These are both great for going second. I had my game 2 against Virtual World, which I did lose because my hand was just so bad. I just Book of Eclipsed his Shen Shen, and that shut off the macro, so all my Blackwing still went to grave, which is important for the combos. But other than that, that's what I was side decking. The only thing that I would maybe change is because I got hand looped by Dark World, I'd maybe cut Strike or D Barrier for Droll, but overall, it was decent. So let's talk about what I like about the deck. So the pros of the deck are, it has a pretty consistent line. It's pretty fun to play, and the boards it makes if you go first are very varied in the interaction. It's completely different from what the meta is prepared for. So against things like Vanadium or Dragon Link or Unchained, they essentially can't play through the double tax dragon. Against things like Purely, they have no way to out Armor Master. they just don't. Speaking of which, that was another thing that I was thinking about, is maybe cutting one of the extract cards for an Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, just so we can out like a Borderland, because that's what I lost to in the first game against Dragon Link. And then finally, the big thing is nobody knows what it does. So when you go summon Simoon, Chain 1 Simoon, Chain 2 Black Whirlwind, they're just so confused. They're like, I guess I'll Ash the Black Whirlwind. And then you're like, oh yeah, you shouldn't have done that. But the cons of this deck are, in terms of like the synchro decks that you could be playing right now, this is probably one of the weakest ones. There's not really any reason to play this over Vanadium or Junk Speeder, Synchron, Turbo, or even other decks that, you know, just synchro summon. The advantage you have is that you have a synchro towers and a full armor master. Another con of this deck is somehow the deck doesn't have a lot of follow-up. Like, it feels like it does, but it really doesn't. If your board gets wiped, you really need to top deck well, and that's kind of something that's holding this deck back. I think this deck is one or maybe two good cards away from playable. The biggest problem is you don't have a good Synchro 8 to go into. That's why you play Blackwing Dragon, is because it's a Synchro 8 you can cheat out. And then you're one card away from a fully complete deck. But overall, I do think this deck is pretty fun. I think if you're going to play it, it's decently cheap. The only thing that's really expensive in terms of what you have to play is like the Silverwind the Ascended is kind of expensive for Edison, and then I guess Chaos Angel, and then Bestial Dispowder if you're going to play that. In terms of the main deck, like obviously the Lubellions, they just got reprinted. They're about $10. They're not super cheap. Druis Worms are again about 10 to 15, but if you didn't already have them, I don't know what you're doing. And then obviously, you know, Prosperity and Small World are kind of up there, but Small World I do believe is going to be in like the 25th anniversary collection, and obviously Prosperity came out in the Pots collection, so hopefully everyone will have access to these cards pretty soon. Otherwise, the core is super cheap. You don't really have to spend a lot of money on cards in order to play this deck. So if you guys want to see some combos for the deck, please let me know down in the comment section so I can know to actually, you know, make the combos. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. If you really enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace!